Our story starts with the patriarch of the Kennedy Empire, a man named Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr. Wow, what a name, very long, but we're just gonna call him Joe. So, Joe was born on September 6, 1888 in East Boston, Mass. So what does that make him? Oh, a Virgo. I think he's a Virgo. And honestly, he's such a Virgo. Joe was born into an extremely poor area made up of Irish Catholic working class immigrants. And at this time, there was this big anti-Irish sentiment. People who were in Boston before the Irish immigrants arrived were like, so when are you guys leaving, huh? So many were just flat broke, homeless, and just stuck in a cycle of poverty that they couldn't get out of. Joe's father, PJ, was beloved by the community. PJ was, it's kind of silly, but PJ was in politics, and it's reported that even though he only had a little more money than everyone else, he always gave back to his community. Joe's sister once said, quote, "When the doorbell would ring, it would be someone down on their luck coming to Papa for help. Papa, can you hear me?" Yeah, he was just a really generous guy. And this allowed him to really succeed in politics. And it also taught Joe a valuable lesson. Money is the real power. When you have money, you can do whatever you want. And this really shaped Joe's personality. Joe was described as a very driven, intense person with a charismatic personality. He was this blonde-haired, light-eyed Irish guy who wore these very distinct round glasses. Yeah, it's kind of giving Tootsie Pop Owl. Remember? How many licks does it take? A 1, a 2, a 3. And then Lil' Kim came out. She's like, how many licks does it take to get to the center of the... That's what's giving. In school, Joe was loved, just like his father, and he made important social connections with the Boston elite. These connections even helped get him into Harvard. And back then, if you got into Harvard, you were set for life. I feel like it's still kind of the same today, but back then it was it was real. But sadly, this wasn't the case for Joe. There was serious prejudice against him in Harvard because he was Irish Catholic. So people went out of their way to exclude poor Joe from social circles and parties. And other students looked at him like he was just a pathetic Irish kid. This was frustrating because he did the work to get there. He was determined to join the banking industry when he graduated and become rich. But after graduation, he struggled to find a job because no one wanted to hire him. It was just like at Harvard. He was an outcast just because he was Irish Catholic. One by one, all his classmates got all these coveted banking jobs in town. So Joe turned to his dad to hook him up with a decent job. And Daddy came through because Joe became a state bank examiner. Even though it wasn't the job he imagined, he realized that this was actually the perfect job for him. Working for the state bank meant he could learn all about the inner workings and rules of the banking industry. This way, he could make the rules work for him. At this point, he was done waiting for people to invite him into the rich boy clubs. No one plays by the rules, so why should he? In 1914, he made a name for himself by rescuing a local bank that was about to go under. As a reward, they made him the president of the bank. So at the age of 25, Joe becomes one of the youngest bank presidents in America. Snaps. And when I was looking into this, I discovered that the bank Joe quote unquote saved was actually his daddy's bank. Yeah. Must be nice. Joe did help this bank, but it was all a setup from his father so he'd get a leg up in the banking industry. So this move gave Joe celebrity status in the banking world. Finally, people stopped treating him like he was working class trash. His first order of business with this new reputation was to lock down a wifey. Joe had been in a little situationship with a woman named Rose Fitzgerald. She was the daughter of Boston's mayor at the time, and they had wanted to get married for years, but her dad wouldn't allow it because Rose's dad didn't think Joe was good enough for his daughter. But when Joe pulled out the save the bank move, her father was like, fine, you guys can get married. Joe's marrying into Rose's political family gave him VIP access and power to the richest families in America. And this is the point when Joe starts creating his empire. He did this by using a little business tactic called insider trading. This is essentially what Martha Stewart did. Yeah. But it's when you invest a ton of money into a business because you heard a secret tip that wink wink might make you a lot of money. And this was completely legal back then. So in 1919, Joe became a stockbroker. And because of a ton of insider trading information, he was able to make super profitable business moves that turned him into a millionaire scary fast. For example, he got a tip to get into real estate during the Great Depression. Like, smart, right? Profit off of the hurt and loss of others. But he followed the tip, and it paid off. When he started doing insider trading, he was worth around $4 million, and by the end of the Great Depression in 1939, he was worth over $180 million, which in today's money is like almost $4 billion. Damn. Yep. He used this money to build his family homes on the waterfront of Cape Cod, which actually still exists today. It's called the Kennedy Compound. Road trip? You want to go? And he got this property specifically because it sat across the water from all those Ivy League assholes who like shunned him from society. Like I said, so Virgo, right? He's like, fuck you guys, I'm here. His reputation as a fierce businessman even got him access to the White House. During the Great Depression, he used some of that windfall of cash to throw his support behind the presidential candidate at the time, FDR. His donations and fundraisers were key to FDR getting that presidential crown. So when FDR was elected president, he made sure to pay back Joe. But not with money. Joe had enough of that. He's like, no. FDR gave Joe the thing he wanted most: political power. So he's given a position that essentially puts him in charge of the stock market. And one of the first orders of business Joe has is to make sure no one can ever get a fortune like he did. So Joe actually helps make insider trading illegal. What a dick. He was like, I know I did it, but like no one else can do it. Just me. Around the same time, Joe and FDR's son created a super profitable booze company, right as the Prohibition was ending. Yeah, I guess he just so happened to know that Prohibition was ending. He's like, oh my God, isn't that crazy? I just like guessed. Here's booze. Now that Joe had all this money and power and his political dreams were starting to come true, he decided to expand his portfolio. And this time, he wasn't going to invest in a boring-ass bank. Nah, he was going to invest in Hollywood, baby. Yeah. Joe started convincing investors to buy up Hollywood studios that were in trouble. He was also giving advice to all these studios on how to stay open and be profitable. So Joe actually became like a huge, important advisor in early Hollywood. When he got to Hollywood, he set his sights on the most famous actress at that time, Gloria Swanson. Just like everyone in town, Gloria was depending on advice from Joe to help with her production company. And before you know it, the two of them, they were in love. The problem? They were both married. Jeez. So Joe uses his power and influence to get Gloria's husband a job in Europe. He's like, yeah, Europe, send him there. You know, so the two could run around Hollywood like the married couple they wanted to be. Joe immediately gets super involved in Gloria's movie career. Like, he convinces her to use all her money and go into debt to star in this expensive, unique movie that no one in Hollywood would touch. I mean, like, he was the money genius after all, so Gloria was like, okay, yeah, I'll do whatever you say. But just a few months into the movie, the production was $11 million over budget. Joe, what happened? You know, whoopsie. So naturally, they were forced to shut it down. After this, Gloria got this horrible reputation in Hollywood, and like no one would hire her for their movies. Her career was just completely over. Gloria's husband wrote her a letter saying that he knew about the affair. Oops. And then he broke up with her. I know, damn, when it rains, it pours. Gloria turned to Joe for support, and he looked her dead in the eye, said nothing, and apparently just walked out. Yeah, he never saw her again. It was a live ghosting.